Hello and welcome to Ask George after day one of the third test between Pakistan and England from Rawalpindi. Our chief correspondent George Dobell is on hand. This really would not work without him. George, we released you from the Multan Hotel, the used Multan Hotel, of course. How have you found Rawalpindi upon your arrival there over the weekend and beyond that?
Lovely. We're in a great hotel. The weather is perfect. I mean, it's sort of upper 20s, maybe 30 degrees. Been looked after really well. Even the drive we drove rather than flew was delightful. Really interesting. I mean, look, we're not having much opportunity, sadly, with the way tours are now. I don't really feel I've been to Pakistan, if I'm honest. But just little things like having a cup of coffee in the garden here is a complete delight. Honestly, it is. This is a really great hotel. So having a lovely time, to be honest.
Okay, good. Well, I wish I hadn't asked.
Sorry.
Let's move. Let's move on. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't mind asking. I'm quite happy. I'm sure everyone's delighted to hear how you are. And there's sometimes where you give that kind of answer, and it's just, I wish I hadn't. Wish you were having a slightly less good time. I think that's the only side.
I'll say one thing. I did go to the High Commission the other day, and I was having a chat with their head of security and asking about, is it really dangerous? And he listed the people who who might, you might not want to bump into. And he went on for ages. Yeah, there is that element of things. Some people really hate us. I don't mean the cricketer. I meant people from the UK.
How many of those people in that list, before we get on to our questions, which I'm sure our listeners and viewers are eagerly anticipating, how many of that list contain some of our journalistic colleagues?
Oh. No, we all get on really well.
No, I just wondered whether they're the sort of people you should stay away from.
Oh no, not at all. No, the days when there used to be PBIs, press box incidents, as they used to call them, they're gone. I mean, honestly, we get on pretty well together, which is just as well because I think I see these people a lot more than I see my family. So just as well, eh?
It's a shame we don't see those incidents anymore, but maybe
Those incidents.
The past is incidents. Yeah, are not are better left in the past. Let's move on to some questions. That's the reason why we're here. Despite our best efforts, Evan Collins is going to kick us off. Quite an easy one. Probably the question that we get asked the most, particularly by those who are not necessarily cricket enthusiasts as much as we are. Who's winning?
I think it's a good question. And I don't think it's that easy, but I think England have their noses in front, actually. Just, you would think that batting last is going to be difficult. It would appear to be getting more difficult all the time. I think we were told that the pitch would be all right for the first couple of days, and actually it's not, is it? It's difficult straight away. Personally, I'm quite enjoying that. And the fact is England got themselves up to what would appear to be a good score. So I think England's nose is in front. They're in front almost entirely because of Jamie Smith. But we'll see. It'll be a dull game, but predictable. But a long way to go. I don't suppose we're going to be around for much more than 3 days, are we?
What's interesting,
that's in relation to the low pitch rather than the security issues we were talking about earlier. Maybe this
again, yeah, we're already going back to that list. I do wonder whether it's interesting, isn't it, that it's spun very, very early and conditions look tricky, given that Pakistan had control of those, would have batted first, and have picked according and have picked their team, quite a volatile, way, and yet, it could easily the boot could easily be on the other foot, couldn't it? And they could have thought, well, we've dictated conditions to such an extent. Oh, and now we've got to bat on this thing. And, oh, actually, it's a lot worse. What have we done?
Yeah, well, they could, except for had they batted first, they still would have had the pitch at its best. I mean, I don't think it's going to get better. I may be wrong, but pitches do die. But I don't think it will get better. So I get their tactic. I think they'd had a really good go at playing other ways, hadn't they? And it had been the best part of 4 years since they'd won a test at home. So they're doing things differently. I definitely think they took a big chance in Multan, but it paid off. This is a bit different, but they're taking a bit of a chance again, and this time they've lost the toss. So were they to win, it would be a fantastic effort, and they got themselves into a great position. England were 118 for 6. In that situation, there's a possibility of being bowled out for 135 or something, isn't there? It's a possibility. So they were on top then, and they were on top because they bowled really well. They took advantage of conditions they recognise, and of course they're exploiting an age-old weakness in English cricket, the ability or inability to play the turning ball. And I thought there were some signs of that today. I thought at times England played. I didn't think they played that well at times, to be honest. But then Jamie Smith came in, and I thought it was a magnificent innings, to be honest. I know he had a wee bit of luck, but he was so good at establishing himself. He was so good at playing himself in. Really early on, there were 14 balls in a row where he didn't score. I think he was on 9 from his first 32. Very un-England, really, in a way. And also maybe not what you expect from him. But he backed himself, didn't he? He backed his defence. He played straight. He didn't sweep very much, which I thought was interesting. And he built an innings. And, of course, once he gets going, he has the ability to go through the gears. He didn't obviously rate the leggy as much as he rated the finger spinners. And when he had the opportunity, he attacked them. But he's ended up with 89, which I think on a different pitch is probably worth 150. How do you... This is the part of the problem with stats in cricket. It shouldn't really be about individual stats, should it? It should be about winning. But honestly, what's 89 worth here? Is it worth 150 on the first test in Multan? Every bit, I'd say.
Yeah, just moving on with Jamie Smith, we had a number of questions concerning him. Some pretty predictable as far as the wicket-keeping role is concerned, which you'd expect. One from George Young that was interesting is Smith a top 6 batter and England's post-Stokes all-rounder? Well, I don't know where he's going to get much of a time with the ball, but certainly a future top 6. Certainly, I would suspect.
Well, sure he is. Absolutely, he could battle the top 6, but it makes a lot of sense to go in at 7, just because of the physical demands of keeping in hot weather, and this way you give him a break mentally and physically between disciplines. You'd hope. So I think Alex Stewart used to say, who obviously did the roles brilliantly for a long time, you didn't really want to bat. I think he said above 5. He said that was the absolute highest you wanted to go. Now, obviously, he went a lot higher as a keeper, but he thought he would say it would take a lot out of you. So, yes, Smith's obviously able. I think if he was a specialist batter, he could probably go 3. I think Harry Brook could too. But he's doing both roles at the moment. And while he is, I think 7 makes sense for him.
And just another one on Smith, but actually a wider one from Cricket Station. Is there a chance of Johnny Bairstow making a comeback into the Test side with Jamie Smith unavailable? He's not going to be in New Zealand, as we understand, as him and his partner are expecting their first child during that series, and with Ollie Pope's form being slightly worrying as well.
Well, I think I'm going to refer to Dumb and Dumber when he is let down gently. And it's something like he's told that it's 1,000,000 to 1 shot, and he latches onto, so there's a chance. And of course there's a chance that Johnny Bairstow could come back. There could be a million things could happen. There could be another outbreak of COVID. There could be the zombie apocalypse. Barring those things, it is a long shot at this stage. He's been terrific. But his career's in the past, I think. He's not going to get younger and probably not going to get more mobile again. And sadly, that injury on the golf course was it was a career changer. It's very sad. And he's had a brilliant career, but they did really, really stick with him. And I presume you're not suggesting he's coming back as keeper. You're suggesting he's coming back as the number 3. He was never, I know he got a Test century in Colombo at number 3, but that wasn't... Look, I think you move forward. And there's quite a lot of good young players out there. And I don't see this lot going back to a 35 whatever year old. I may be wrong, maybe prove wrong. I think he's a brilliant player. I hope he's remembered with a lot of fondness by England supporters. I think sometimes he was misunderstood. But I'd be really surprised if they went back to him. I think it would take an extraordinary sequence of events. But just, I don't know if there are any more on Jamie Smith, but I thought he did something today, which is why he was picked. I don't know, are there more on Jamie Smith?
No, not particularly.
Well, we saw two things he did today. He didn't just he batted with the tail really well. And I'm Ben Folkes' biggest fan, but he did stuff today that Ben Folkes can't do. There's no way around it. He played himself in, and that, I think Gus Atkinson was hugely important because he trusted Gus Atkinson's batting, and that mattered because it allowed him to play himself in rather than try and play big shots too early. So I think Gus Atkinson, this is the thing about stats, what did Gus Atkinson get? 30-something, doesn't look like much. It's a team game, and without Gus Atkinson's 30, there's no way you get Jamie Smith's 89. So he trusted Gus Atkinson to allow himself to play in, and then he went through the gears and accelerated, particularly once Gus Atkinson is out. Played much more aggressively when he had less faith in the other batters, and that's fine. And he showed that he wasn't just a biffer, and they never said he was. They showed he had the ability to play both ways. This fella could really bat. I don't think there are any issues about his batting, and he plays straight. He trusts his defence, and he has a wide range of shots. So he can go through the gears. The great thing about being able to go through the gears is not just to stick in fifth. And he's happy to, as I say, he played out 14 balls. If Ollie Pope plays out 14 balls, he looks like he's going to panic. He looks as if he can't take a breath. So there's so much to like about Jamie Smith's batting, the tempo of it, the calm head, and the range of shots. I think they've got a real good one there. But, why rush him? 7's absolutely fine for now. And I tell you, when they get to the Ashes, when they play against India, that 4, 5, 6, 7 is a strength. I wouldn't mess with it.
Okay, well, that brings us to a nice way to end part one. In part two, we'll kick off talking a bit more about how England went about their first innings.
Subscribe to The Cricketer for a special offer price of just £1 a month to gain access to all my reports from Pakistan and all the news and analysis from the award-winning cricketer team.
Okay, welcome back to part two. Just to pick up, actually, on the end of part one there, you talked about Jamie Smith and the way that I suspect we're going to see something quite similar from, and I think it's why Jordan Cox coming straight in for him and sort of being is a like for like. I think he's going to be able to do a similar thing, array of shots, go through the gears, that kind of thing. I think that works really well. Do you think, who do you think England will take as the backup keeper? Will it be Ollie Pope or will it be someone else?
To New Zealand?
Yeah, as a backup keeper to
really good question.
Jordan Cox.
I suspect it'll be Ollie Pope. I mean, I think they think of New Zealand as a pretty comfortable place to keep, which it probably is. The worry with I've been a bit surprised by the reaction to the stories about Cox. Cox is a keeper. He sees himself as a keeper. He just hasn't kept very much. And I know that sounds crazy, but he really damaged his. He had a really horrible finger injury, and after that he was ill with his was it appendicitis? I can't remember what it was. Was it appendicitis?
Yeah.
So he wasn't able to. It wasn't that he didn't want to. It wasn't that Essex didn't want him to. He couldn't. So the plan was always go to Essex as first choice. That's what he was offered. So he is a keeper. He does see himself as a keeper, but he can just really bat as well. So he's very good. I wouldn't. I mean, none of them are Ben Folkes with the gloves. Yeah, forget about that. None of them are Ben Folkes. People are saying to me on Twitter today that Stokes' stats aren't as good. I mean, your stats are nonsense, mate. We cannot have good enough metrics for fielders and keeping. We just don't have them. I'll give you an example. I'm sure we've talked about this before. If a keeper doesn't go for a catch, it doesn't count as a drop currently. I've checked this. It doesn't. So, And equally, if you get a keeper standing up on a turning surface in India, and there are lots of chances, or Sri Lanka, things may count against them, which another keeper isn't being used because you're only trusting them to stand back in New Zealand, for example. And so I'd be quite nervous about Jordan Cox keeping in India. And to be honest, I'd be quite nervous about Jamie Smith keeping in India at the moment. But I'd have huge trust in Ben Folkes doing it. But at the same time, there's no way Ben Folkes could have done what Jamie Smith did today. And I think Ben Folkes is brilliant. I love it. I think he's a wonderful cricketer. But people have different attributes. And I get why they've gone for the package of skills that Jamie Smith has. But he could absolutely is good enough to be a specialist batter. And anyway, Jordan Cox is the same. So who are they going to go with? I don't know. I mean, Ollie Robinson at Durham's another really good cricketer. But I suspect that they won't go beyond the squad. I mean, Ben Duckett keeps too, doesn't he? So, or used to. So I would think they would stick with Ollie Pope, who kept in, I think he made his keeping debut at Hamilton, where the ball will hardly get to the keeper because Kane Williamson, does Kane Williamson average 100 there? Does Joe Root as well? It's pretty flat.
Let's move on ever so slightly to two questions really about how England went about their batting. I guess how they went about the first part of their batting. JB asks, when are we going to question the thought process and shot selection of England players without being told we have to take the rough with the smooth? And Verpin Acharya asks, are England's batters making the pitch look worse than it actually is?
Good questions. First one, I think it's absolutely fair to raise some questions. There is a sort of sentiment from the England management that if you question anything, you're against them. And I think it's silliness. And you could admire so much of what they do. And you'd be hard pushed not to admire Ben Stokes as a leader and as a player. But at the same time, have some reservations. And I thought there were some, I think they would admit privately that they got it wrong this morning, that, the sweep probably wasn't the shot to play when the ball is keeping that low, when the bounce wasn't regular. And that, Jamie Smith showed there were other options, but he got that feedback from the team. So equally, it should be reasonable to point out that Zach Crawley and Ollie Pope have averages in the low 30s. They're sort of in Graham Hick territory. And they really have had a lot of backing. Now, Zach Crawley, I understand the logic because they think he plays the fast ball well, which he does extremely well. But what he doesn't do is play the moving ball, laterally moving ball. And he showed that again today. He's had a couple of real poor dismissals against the turning ball in his last two innings. And then there's Ollie Pope. Now, Ollie Pope's made 3 centuries this year, but he's still averaging in the 30s. I think he might be down to 33 this year. And he doesn't look like a number 3 to me. He still looks very, very frenetic. He doesn't have the calm head. He's batting on off stump. I don't know if you noticed that. Was he batting? Yeah. Several of them are batting on off stump. Now, I don't have any TV footage or commentary here, so I apologise if this is going over stuff that's been discussed all day. But I don't have any of that. And I don't really have a great view. I got there yesterday. I sat up beautifully behind the arm 2 days ago for the media, beautifully behind the arm. And then a fella turns up yesterday with a TV camera right in front of me. Bit of a bummer, but I thought I'll stick to it. It's still a pretty good spot right behind the arm. Today he had a parasol. Couldn't see a bloody thing. So, take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt. But several of them are on off stump. Now, if you're on off stump and you've got a very sideways on technique, you have to play around your front pad or sweep. I think that's a massive mistake. But who am I to tell these England batters with thousands of test runs that they've got their techniques wrong? But the logic is not that wrong, is it? Off stump, very sideways on. How are you playing the ball on middle stump? Okay, just the logic of that, the geometry of that. So I think Ollie Pope is, I'd love to see him be a bit more open. I would love to see him use his feet. I would love to see him express his natural talent with more relaxation and calm. But they have given him a hell of a long go, and I'm not sure he's a number 3. And the problem that you have now is that it's getting to the stage where it's too late to make a change before the Ashes. It's not, but it's getting there. And they would have to make the change now, and they're not going to, are they?